Thanks for joining us. If you're just joining us now, you've not missed too much. We just spoke about political updates and, of course, what is happening on the polity. And now we've got into the segment, and it's actually laughable, but it looks like every Thursday now we're going to dedicate Thursdays into talking about the educational sectors and reforms in Nigeria. But then we do not know about that yet. But for today, we're going to be talking about educational reforms and injecting values back into the system. And trust me, a lot is actually happening in the educational sector, where everybody just shoves it aside and feels like, oh, we should deal more with the economy. But no, today we have in the studio Chidiebere, Ugochukwu, Njoku. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so very much, Mercy.
It's nice to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay, all right. And let's just delve into it properly. Talking about educational reforms, there's been lots of back and forth. I mean, given the new administration, of course, we have the, let's talk about the hike in tuition fee, how it's going to affect students psychologically, and whether we like it or not, even not just students, it's going to affect even parents. Because given that, oh, I paid 25,000 naira for my word last semester, and this semester I'm paying some exorbitant price of over 150,000 naira. Yeah, don't you think this is actually a lot for Nigerians to take in right now? Okay,
so I think that of course you and I know that this is a whole lot, right? And it's laughable that these things are, you know, it's the part that feeds the people who are making these laws are not taking under consideration, or are not putting into consideration how it affects these parents who are supposed to generate these funds for these future leaders, right? So you have someone who has about a civil servant who has about 5 or 4 children in the university.
University, yeah.
How do you even think he's going to survive this government? How do you think he's going to survive this year and the next? You know, so it's a whole lot, because even when they do, psychologically this case might not pay attention in schools. You know, because, you know, once you're done paying school fees, and there's a lot more to pay for. You have people in medical schools, you know how exorbitant the rates of the of the textbooks are. You know, you have to go for seminars, you have to do projects, you have to go do research, and there are no fundings for such research. I've been to institutions where I talk to, and I realized that there is no provision for research in most Nigerian universities, and it's embarrassing. So you pay more attention to the fees you want to generate from the school fees or the substance that you want to, you know, produce from the citadel of higher learning.
But don't you think this issue is actually right from the top, given even the federal government themselves? And let's take it back to last year, I beg your pardon, where we had the strike that went on for about 8 months, and then now the federal government just implemented as of May 31st, actually, but then as of last week it was fully implemented that there would be no work, no pay for most of these lecturers. And these are the people that were even still complaining that we do not have people that are up to standard, I mean up to par. Do these people actually go for professional courses to actually still stay on board and still on top of their game? And now the federal government is saying no work, no pay for 8 months.
So how do you do no work, no pay? You know, so I was talking to you earlier, you know, about priority. I think priorities is where all this happens. You know, have we prioritized education in this country? Because a system of government that hasn't prioritized education has no business investing money in education, right? So you talk about how much money you know, do we commit to education, you know, from the top to the bottom, right? So if a system is more interested in how much they're gonna give into, you know, furnishing of senatorial offices and all of that, and the House of Representatives, rebuilding of, and not so much to saying these people who are supposedly teaching the leaders, our leaders of tomorrow, should be equipped with all the things that they need, right? And their welfare should be paramount. For me, it's pivotal, and it shouldn't be debatable, right? You see, health and education, those are 2 sectors that if you're looking for the future of a country or a society, you have to put all your energy, all your finances, everything should be
okay. And now let's take it to the injecting values back into the system. I'd like you to read the values we have in the educational system right now, because I like something you said before we came back. You said education is not just learning about maths and English in school. I mean, it goes, I mean, there's this saying that it's one thing to go through school. Did the school actually go through you?
So I was going to tell you something. Two things. I was at a banking hall some weeks ago, and a phone got stolen. And they said looking for who. They were searching for who stole it.
Stole the phone.
And they realized it was a teller, a banker there.
Excuse you?
Good. Another story. I was robbed in Lagos. The guys moved in front of me and, you know, offered to give me a ride. You know, it's okay, we can push you down here, then you can get your ride. And I was really appreciative. And I said, thanks. I got in. We gisted. We talked football, talked Manchester United and all. When I got down, I realized I didn't have my phone. And there was something, an urgency, a sense of urgency when they were asking me that this is the bus stop where I can get where, you know. So I was like, oh, thank you. So I came in, you know, slammed the door, and then I realized my phone's and my wallet, nothing was in my pocket. And those guys drove off. Those guys were looking like you and I. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I get what you're
That the hideous crimes are committed in this country now are not perpetrated by people who are living under the bridges, not by people who have tattoos and piercings or living under the bridge.
And of course, that's a normal Nigerian.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So now the toxicity has eaten deep into the average Nigerian. That's how bad the system is now. So everyone is on survival mode. What can I do to? How do I sell my brother? How do I traffic drug? How do I? So it's at the end of the day, we will eat the brunt of this, right? So, you know, I think that until we start injecting values into the school system, we'll end up producing leaders who, at the point of or at the seat of leadership, will realize, oh, wow, I forgot my values knapsack in the bus, and I came here with just maths and English. And maths and English wouldn't give you good leadership. You can make first class for all I care, but if you don't have true values that make up for proper leadership, and those things are they are not rocket science. You talk about self-awareness, you talk about social awareness. These are skills. You have relationship skills. You have empathy, and it's all the components of emotional intelligence. And I go around schools based on the projects that I run. I go around schools and I realize that none of these things are core, you know, are paramount in these schools. And I listen to them. Does anyone teach you about empathy?
But do you actually think schools should actually have people teaching students about empathy and how to relate with people?
Definitely. It's very important because we are all social animals, you know, right? That's how psychologists would exactly. So we are all social animals. And for you to effectively function, you have to understand how Mercy thinks. You have to understand that if Mercy is this way, then I have to give her that way, right? That way we can, you know, coexist, you know, fluid coexistence. You know,
I like something you said the other time about everybody's in the survival mode. Could it be said that I mean I love politics a lot, so I'm going to dive into politics a bit. Do you think the policy or the environmental factor is partly why everybody in the survival mode? Because even if you say, oh, you want to teach students, I mean there are some people that can't even afford to go to school. How do you teach these people these things? Don't you think this thing is something that's inbuilt? I mean, for every human.
Okay, so there is a nature and there's a nurture. So there is your innate qualities that you are born with, and there's also the part where what your environment, you know, does. The environment does a whole lot, right? And when you look at the agents of socialization, you talk about the family, you talk about church, you talk about peer groups, and you talk about, you know, the schools, and then, you know, the government, right? And I think the government has a role to play in shaping our minds or their minds. So, take for instance, I walk into a school. Sorry, I used stories to actually answer your question. So I walked into a studio somewhere in Owerri, and I met this kid who was wearing his school uniform, high school uniform on. He was working on a keyboard. He was making music for some people. So he was a child, but he was a producer, right? Nice, cool. And right there, now that's cool, right? Yeah. But you know what was wrong? He was 12. That was school hours. No school hours, yeah. School uniform, and then there's weed, smoke all over. You know how creatives go on, right? I'm not trying to judge anybody, but those kids were below 18. They shouldn't be seen where those drugs are. So he's making music, which is a good thing, but the wrong time, wrong place. Wrong place, yeah. Right? Now, I spoke to him. I said, why are you not in school? He wasn't paying attention. I said, you're in government college. He says, yes. I said, okay, I'm going to talk to your principal and I'm going to make sure that you get expelled. He turns and says, what have I done to you, sir? He says this is how he pays his bills.
This is how he pays his school fees.
This is how he pays his bills. So I said, oh, really? So now, going further, I asked him to play me his school anthem. That I would like to hear his school anthem. He played it and I sang along with him. And I told him, I'm an old boy, right? And then he says, are you going to take my case up? I said, I'm not taking your case up, but I'm still going to talk to your principal. So I walked into the school, and then I realized that, I'm sorry I mentioned the school anyway,
okay.
you know, so, and I realized that the school didn't even have a music department. And remember when I told you that education should be holistic?
Oh, yeah,
these things have a role they play in our minds, right?
That's right.
Art, music, especially has a way of dousing vices. Right? People get away with music. You know, they express themselves. And there is no art department and there is no music department. So these are the things that you could look at and say, if there's going to be a reform, can we have a music department in this school? And when we have a music department in this school, what it means is that these guys who are walking the streets, who are seasoned music makers, can actually be lecturers in these institutions. Yes. So you have these kids not being in a place where they have marijuana making music, but inside the school, in a controlled environment, making music. You can say, okay, why don't we have like choral competitions for every...
trust me, I get your point, but don't you think this actually boils down to the society? Now, even the government aside, because you said something about being robbed by people that had no piercings, no tattoos. And of course, you know, in the Nigerian society, I mean, this is not a moral show, but you know, the Nigerian sentiment is for people to actually feel you are morally upright, you must not braid your hair as a man. You must not have tattoos, extra piercings as a lady. There should be a certain way. Of course, I kind of agree with some of these things. But then looking at it from a bigger perspective, don't you think this is actually part of what actually contributes to not having certain things in Nigerian universities? I mean, we don't even have history back in most schools in Nigeria, which I still feel it's a big issue because priority
is still the problem. You know, if we can, because I mean, for me, knowing history is knowing your identity.
Knowing your identity, yeah.
So I was watching a musical some days ago. It was Alexander Hamilton. I don't know if you know about it. It was one of American founding fathers, right? There was a musical. It was a big hit, right? And I was watching it. For once, I felt like I was an American. Scene after scene, I went and I was flipping through history books, and I knew so much about Alexander Hamilton, more than I know about Nigerian nationalists. And that's not a good thing. What people talk about the Nazis, people talk about the World War, people talk about Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Why can't we talk about these things and be emotionally firm that these things won't trigger some kind of war or rage amongst ethnic divide? Sorry, I stutter sometimes.
It's okay.
No, so this is where the problem lies, because someone at the top is saying, let's not teach history because it could trigger old memories.
Old memories, yeah.
Why wouldn't you teach histories? It's okay for us to be provoked, and that's why we're human beings. So at some point, we need to sit down and say, okay, I'm provoked, but you know, I need to know this. Because if you don't know this, you don't have an identity, to be very honest. So you see, that's where the priority, comes. Because I'm putting so much energy on the history. A lot of things need to be done. An absolute reform, a whole, not overhaul. Okay. They are doing some things right. I'll give them kudos. Okay. But we should move from a place of the legislation to implementation. Yeah. Okay. Implementation is where I ask questions. I walk into a school. I'm like, so who are the people who are conducting the SME, the M&E, the monitoring and evaluation of this so-said laws that the government has put on schools? It's like, so do we even have a music department? No. So who's supposed to make a report back to the top to say every school is running a musical department, and it's functional? So someone actually does that. So how do we get to meet these people who are at the middle, whose job is to make sure that these things that the government has said should be in every school are actually in the schools? So implementation is also a big deal, but priority is number one. if your priorities are misplaced, you're never going to make this you won't see the relevance or the benefits of these things to the larger society. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm someone that likes to talk about problems, but then will have to prefer solutions to most of the problems. So what do you think would actually solve most of these reforms and actually instill values? And they say it takes a village to actually raise a child, and whether you like it or not, it starts with you and I, not even the federal government. So I'd like you to prefer some solutions. I'm sure
you and I. I love the fact you said you and I. So it starts with us.
Yes.
So I didn't plan to advertise the work that we do.
Okay.
But for the past 2 years, I've been able to access 350 schools.
Okay.
And we're all self-sponsored. So I select a school and I go with my team and I teach emotional intelligence, right? And then I also equip them with skills because I teach photography and filming, right? Free of charge. And I walk into an organization and I ask a telecoms, and I said, would you want to partner with me on this project? Telecom says, oh yeah, we're ready. Only if your government can put an approval letter. And I go to Commissioner for Education. I'm not going to mention the state. I don't know if I'm allowed to. So I walk in there and I'm saying, this is what we have. This is a proposal. This is what we're doing. This is what we've done so far, right? Can you come and say, you have access to run these things? And this commissioner says, what's in it for me?
Well,
you see,
still a Nigerian practice.
Yes, so the priority. So even when you're trying to do the bit that you want to do as a citizen, right? Your responsibility to make sure that you raise, because let me tell you, Mercy, if you're able to raise the children in your neighborhood, right, you wouldn't be scared of building, you wouldn't be worried about building high walls. That's one. And you won't be worried about how your daughter or your son is going to grow up or where the environment is going to grow, because you already know that his environment has been overseen by you. The reason most of these people pat themselves with the armor tanks and all while going to church and all is because they know the monsters they have left unattended, or the human beings they've left unattended on the streets who have now become monsters. Right? So the government has a huge responsibility. Let's prioritize education. Let's even start employing fresh graduates who are very keen on educating students. Give them jobs, give them very good pay. Let there be great incentives. Let also be good pensions, and let these things be consistent, right? And if you make laws and say this is how much is a teacher, trust me, I would gladly go into teaching in Nigeria if the salary was just slightly a little bit what it is now. I'm not even looking for something so humongous, right?
Okay.
So yeah, the government owes the society that. Let them make it a priority. If they can make education a priority, I think all the other pieces of the puzzle would be fixed. Yes.
Speaking about pieces of the puzzle, let's take it from the lecturer's angle. We have a few minutes to go.
All right.
From the lecturer's angle, and let's say teachers generally, don't you think they need to improve on themselves? Because given that there was actually a time a sitting governor actually had all the teachers from all the schools in a particular state come together and told them to write exams, and barely 2 or 3 of them could pass those exams. And now if you ask questions, these people do not even know what they call emotional intelligence, not to talk of empathy. So how do you instill what you do not have in these children?
Okay, so I think I've worked in an organization where when I entered, and when I was leaving, I realized that I came in empty. An organization's job, right, is to know that Mercy has all the ingredients to sit here and conduct this interview, right?
Yeah.
However, there's a lot more we could demand from Mercy. So we're not looking for someone higher than Mercy. We want Mercy, and then we'll train Mercy. So Mercy will leave here trained. Some of those teachers go in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years without training. There should be funds for training of teachers. There should be funds that says, okay, we are sending you to South Africa, or we are sending you to US. Rather than give this what's that prayer text again that is trending everywhere to these people. Why don't you put money down and say teachers can actually go and get training on, because time happens to education, right? If you're stuck in one place, you're going to be, obsolete, and you can't teach these children.
Yeah.
You need to learn to be able to teach these children. These days, you have to learn to be. You need to read to be able to be a good parent, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same way. These teachers are not just there dormant. These teachers need education too. So what we do, what our foundation does, is to go train students and then train teachers. When we train teachers, we hand them over the curriculum that says this is what we need to be doing, and then we can sit back and then run the monitoring and evaluation to make sure that these lectures are actually done and done right. And we also interview the students to know, okay, how were you then and how are you now? What are the challenges? Is there anything missing? So if we pay attention to these things, and this is just one person doing this, right? And I believe that some other people are actually putting their energy and finances into, ideas like this, right? Imagine the government says, okay, you know what? Let's run this through these agencies, right? Let's train these teachers, because most of these people don't even know. You're talking to a commissioner for education. He doesn't even know. He has no idea what you're talking about. So he's licking his fingers. He's eating in front of me. He's saying, what were you saying? So emotional intelligence. So what does it mean? And you're commissioner for education, really? Yeah. So it's so sad to say, but the problem, I understand the part of the teachers who are not qualified and that like you can't pour from an empty glass, right? Yes. So you're saying these teachers are not even supposed to be teaching here. They're not qualified. Someone put them there. That's also the government, right? So if I'm not, no sentiments, right? If they're not supposed to be there, then take them out. Then you can employ the ones who are ripe, and the ones who are ripe, once you get them in, make sure that you make provision for funds for training. Trainings are very important. I train every week. If it's not bodybuilding, it's reading a book about something. You have to constantly work the brain. Yeah.
All right, our viewers at home, you've heard from our guest today. You have to constantly, of course, feed the brain. And trust me, I've learned so much. When you see me quiet like this, I know our viewers know already. All right, so thank you very much, Chidiebere.
Thank you so much,
Njoku. It's been an insightful and powerful one.
Thank you.
I'm sure our viewers at home, I would have loved to turn off the phone for our parents to actually call in and make their contributions. But maybe next time when you join us on the program, I would
gladly come here.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Our viewers at home, this is where we wrap it up for this particular segment. After the break, we'll be joined by the VC Cosmopolitan University. That's Professor Carl Adams. Stay tuned. Don't touch it down.